Good morning and welcome to the Level Set. Thanks for tuning in. We're here on a beautiful Saturday morning, and we're joined by just a brain trust of knowledge this morning. We're going to delve into some topics today that are pertinent now and in the past and forever. So with no further ado, we're joined by Mike Jones, Dr. Charles Alexander, and out of Gary, Indiana, uh, a cultural icon, Kwabena. And so with no further ado, Dr. Alexander, I'd like for you to lay the foundation for our topics this morning, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So last week marked an anniversary of a very important occurrence in our political history, and feel like we need to do, probably we need to dedicate a couple of shows to this topic in much the same way that we have in terms of our discussion of the color convention movement. And the event that I'm speaking of is the Gary Convention. And so the Gary Convention occurred in March 10th through March 12th of 1972 over in Gary. And it brought together, many different ideologies and groups, factions, or what have you, across the continuum, across the span of the movement, of our representation, of our needs. And there were things, there were many things addressed over the course of that, and the establishment of a Black agenda, things that were being worked on prior to the Gary Convention, things that came out as targeted goals coming out of it, and things that still filter to the surface now, and that we really got to be careful about, because if we're not clear, again, this is another one of those examples of, like, if we're not clear and we're not tracing our agenda from a historical point of view, then we're vulnerable to folks who come espousing things that we think are for us, but are really about them. And not that we can't benefit from it, but usually what happens is, and I'll give you an example. Just this past week, you got the guy from Kentucky, I forget the congressman, I think from Kentucky, who's who's pushing the legislation for no against no knock warrants, which is an awesome thing. We need no knock warrants, but that came out of the Gary Convention. That don't come from him. That came out of the Gary Convention. And so when we had these folks before us bringing forth things that, though they can be beneficial to us, we need to know the origins of them. And so a lot of our political ideology, um, was was encapsulated in that 3 day event. And so that's what we want to do a deep dive on, and that's part of the reason why uh, we invited our dear brother Kwabena to join us today, because with boots on the ground, this brother is as Attorney Fields, he's a cultural and historical icon over in Gary, and always um, bringing forth the history and the knowledge uh, about Gary, and not just about Gary, but about the movement in general. And but definitely boots on the ground in Gary and Chicago metropolitan area. So, brother, what are your thoughts about the importance of the Gary Convention, brother Kwabena?
Very important, very significant. I was talking to some oh, it was so important and so significant that 2 years ago on the 50th anniversary, we had a commemoration event actually right in the same place where the main session of the 72 convention was held, which was West Side High School. Right now it's called West Side Leadership Academy. So he struggled with the school system and got the resources. Black Lives Matter helped out tremendously. And we got the building, and we had about 30 some people came through either in person or online to participate. And these were legacies, a lot of legacy of organizations and actual people who organized and helped put that together in 1972. And even some people who were there, some students, a couple students who were at that school at the time as youth delegates were there. And so a couple of them spoke. And so it was a powerful piece. And, you know, I was asked the other day, what came out of the piece you guys did a couple of years ago? A lot of information. It was not a follow-up. The follow-up was supposed to be held, I think, in Newark or somewhere a little later, but this was just a commemoration of what took place. And I think we have to do that. We have to do that too, because as you just shared, we have to know how important this was. Our turnout was dismal that day, and it was in the midst of COVID. It was, you know, it was cold, but it could have been cold in March of 1972 because we know where we live. But the information's there, and luckily today we're able to archive it and catch it. So we do have a link to the 50th anniversary recognition of the National Black Political Convention. It's a lot you have to put in social media to get it to come up, but it is there. Part 1 is there. Still got to get part 2 up. But we had people like the predecessor to Shirley Chisholm. It was for the National Congress of Black Women, Dr. Ife Williams, who was with us, and she was right along with Dick Gregory's son. I think his name was Chester. Well, it's not Chester Gregory, but Dick Gregory's son, who was with us. Mayor Hatcher, his youngest daughter, Attorney Renee Hatcher, she was with us. We had Chokwe Lumumba, who I didn't realize he was even there until looking at the footage, and I said, wait a minute, that looked like Chokwe Lumumba up there on stage. So his daughter, Rukia, she was there with us. Rukia, I think she was there with us speaking. And so many others. Bob Law was with us, one of our brothers who works with us with the National Black Leadership Alliance from Detroit, who was an actual delegate who walked out with the Detroit delegation when they walked out in 1972. He was there with us. So Sister Mama Saru, who was organizer, veteran with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, she was with us. We had representatives of the Black Panther Party who were there with us, who spoke about political prisoners, and students, again, former students at the time, who spoke about political prisoner situation. And so just so much. We had Baba Keedy, who's like that's brother does a lot. He talked about just so many important things about our future, because part of our theme was, where do we go from here? You know, when we did that commemoration, what's next? And one of the things I thought that was real cool about it is that we had not a lot, but we had some students there. And so 50 years from now, hopefully they'll be celebrating, 48 years from now, the 100th anniversary, or recognizing the 100th anniversary of this event. And at that point, they could say they were there 50 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Just like we had some people who were there at the original event. So yeah, I was there with some people who were actually there at the time. A lot of that stuff is, people may say it's nostalgic, it's recognizing, but it's still important. It's still important to have this information and to share it. And we had some.
It's more important today than it was back then, in my opinion. And I tell you why I feel that way. Last week, the Urban League released their State of Black America, and their measuring rod for the health of Black America is white America, which is fatally flawed from the beginning. If you look at the agenda that was set out, the agenda was one that essentially dealt with the wellness of the Black community. It did not, and it dealt with the sickness associated with one inequality. So if we could talk about the actual agenda of what it was back then, because we're talking 1972, we're talking March of 1972, we're talking 2,000 individuals, and over 2,000 individuals that went to Gary, Indiana, for the sole purpose of the wellness of Black folks. And one of the ringing and overwhelming themes was what was it? Unity without, help me out there, bro. Help me out there.
Without conformity.
Unity without uniformity.
Mhm.
And another thing that I found just fascinating was that the Congressional Black Caucus, although there were members in attendance, uh, did not endorse the Black agenda. But before we get into that, let's talk about specifically, in terms of what the Black agenda was that was laid out in 1972.
Well, let me say too
So,
that there was around 10,000 actual people who were there, so it was a
Well
crazy.
over 10,000. Yeah, right. And was it over? What were the number of delegates that were there?
I don't know the number of delegates, but I think they had delegates from numerous delegates from so many states. I don't think all the states were covered, but we all
Okay.
see a picture of them with all the,
All right. Thank you for that correction. That's awesome.
so, so one of the awesome things, and this is something that we've talked about here before, like we end up as we near elections, usually as we near the national, the presidential election, there's always somebody running around talking about we need a Black agenda. And our agenda has been fundamentally the same uh, since 1830. That the issues that we've been fighting for, that we've been demanding, that we've been organizing around, have remained fundamentally the same since 1830. And I think the documentary of the Gary Convention, Nation Time, is awesome. And one of the things that comes out there is, early on in the proceedings, uh, I think Mayor Hatcher acknowledges, he's like, this isn't the beginning of our political, movement. He said, we had conventions in the 1800s. So he references in his early remarks, he references the Colored People Conventions. And so that's a fundamental piece, and the of that it exists as part of the continuum of our political and organizational efforts. Um, the other thing to know is that it generated a Black agenda, and so when we had these people standing around, oh, we have a Black agenda, and we've had a Black agenda, and so we can't keep starting all over every 4 years, in search of these things that have always been important to us. And so what came out of Gary was action agenda items for the people and action agenda items for political office holders.
Two very, very
So,
distinct groups, and that I think we need to highlight. And Mike Jones, as soon as we summate, would like for you to comment on that. Go right ahead, Doc.
and so the agenda items for the people are political empowerment, economic empowerment, human development, international policy, and black people, communications, rural development, environmental protection, and self-determination of the District of Columbia. And so those are action items. They're the same action items so those are the things that the people need to be organized and moving on. And those happen to be what? Those happen to be the same agenda items that we utilize to vet and to develop Black leadership. So they're the same agenda items for Black office holders and office seekers, right? And so and in the document, it lays it all out. It lays out, what things people are supposed to be doing, what the people are supposed to be fighting for and advocating for. So, for example, in the political empowerment. The National Black Political Convention should create a structure to be called the National Black Assembly, and an election process to that body to continue permanently after the National Black Political Convention. So that was one of the aspirational goals, to establish and maintain a vehicle by which this could continue. Now, there were conventions, and so this was 72. There was a convention in 74 and 76 and 80. And I think it becomes pretty obvious, kind of how we lost some of that Gary momentum, but the intent of this thing was to establish and maintain the vehicle to continue this movement in much the same way that it had continued from 1830, uninterrupted from 1830 to the 1890s. The goal and the hope was that this thing was going to go from 1972 forward. And so, unfortunately, that has not necessarily been the case, at least not in the context of the convention. And so, but they have laid out what the Black Assembly would be responsible for, research, to contextualize what our needs are from a historical perspective and, and real time at that point. Community engagement, talking about the assembly responsible for redistricting and reappropriations. All of these things necessary for us to be able to, build and establish and maintain our political base. Political accountability, like how is it that we identify leadership and hold leadership accountable? These are all of the fundamental things that were discussed, and those things to come out of the convention. A piece that we've talked about in here over and over and over again. There must be political education and political action programs at the local, precinct, municipal, state, and national levels designed to educate and activate Black people toward political empowerment at all levels, equip Black people to use balance of power politics effectively, create a thorough understanding and use of available political power, encourage the complete mastery of the use and application of voting and other political power tools to achieve the interests of Black people locally and beyond the local sphere, encourage involvement in election campaigns of Black candidates. This education and activation should especially involve Black youth. The learn by doing method should be basic to these programs. Practical politics should be taught in public schools, and political discovery forces be established at local levels. And so that, this was the fundamental, this was the whole purpose of the piece, is developing that power base for Black empowerment. And so, Mike Jones, what do you recall about the movement, and why it was important then, why our political movements have always been important, and why we need to get back into that space?
Well, yeah, because I realized I'm the only one on the call that was actually grown when this happened. I wasn't an old guy, but I was 22, and I had lived through the mid 60s to that point. I mean, my whole maturation into adulthood, literally, but political adulthood maturity happened from the 60s to that era. And a lot of things changed after 72, 73. You could argue that that period was almost like Reconstruction after the Civil War. We had 8 radical years of Black political activity and energy, both literal political activity, but also intellectual activity that culminated, or peaked would be the best word, by about 1972. So let me go back, because I actually made some notes as both you brothers was talking, so I wouldn't forget. One of the things, Charles, you started us on this, the color conventions, several months ago. And what has struck me, and it's something I've been wrestling with for an extended period of time, is how much we've changed as a people, and also how much America has changed. Because as I was thinking this morning, as you were talking, if you're under 40 years old, you ain't got a clue what we're talking about. Matter of fact, if you're under 40 years old, you can't even imagine the Black community that we're referencing that did this. And you're right, from 1830, you could literally say 272, we were trying to define ourselves politically in the American project. And I didn't remember this as the the motto, but I wrote it down again today. Unity without uniformity. And that's been our struggle through all of this. How do we get a theory of the case that defines our reality, and that everybody can find a way to fit into, rather than becoming dogmatic and saying this is what it is and it can't be that. So I'll take something out of my little red book. And the convention in that period of time was literally what Mao talked about in China for the Cultural Revolution. Let 100 schools of thought, let 100 flowers bloom, let 100 schools of thought contend. So the real question is, how do you take that and make some comprehensive strategic overview? Because that's really, I would suggest that we talk about an agenda, but we don't need so much a Black agenda as we need a Black perspective. Because if we had a Black perspective, you would make the tactical adjustments about what the operating agenda should be based on your understanding of that Black reality in that moment. So there would be some underlying normative values that are the foundation for intellectual construct that explains your reality and guides your actions. So I think really, as I think back on that time, that's really what we were struggling with. What's that? Because if we could figure that out, then we'd all know what to do. We'd go from, since some of us ball junkies on here, we'd go from pickup ball to we got a team now. And everybody knows what their job, what their role is on the team, and it's all part of this overall strategy. I would say now, based on 4 decades of experience, it's a fallacious assumption or flawed assumption that says the agenda of elected officials is the same as activists, because they do 2 different things. Elected officials can have the perspective and values of activists, but what they're required to do in the space they're in don't allow for the purity of activists. But activists are important because they help define the context and the agenda. And even when I was on the board of aldermen 100 years ago, 40 years, literally 40 years ago, one of the things I valued in the relationship that I had with Black activists, who sometimes was in our ass, mine too. But what it did was it pushed the environment in a direction that allowed me to negotiate harder because they were on everybody. So you had to have this symbiotic relationship, and that's why I'm talking about a team thing, where everybody understands what their role is in all of this. And I can think, and I think we used as a model correctly, but not efficiently. Kind of, we thought of ourselves, and I still kind of do in some ways, as a colony in rebellion. We were identifying with the revolutionary movements for the 20th century. And even in those contexts, you do have, whether it was the ANC or the Irish Republic Army, you do have a political wing and a military wing because they're doing different things. You don't ask the cats doing the fighting to do the same, to stop and then figure out the politics. And you don't ask the guys doing the politics to figure out and make judgments about the fight, but they take advantage of each other's symmetry. And somewhere they talk it, but visually, for quote the colonial enemy, they don't look like they're always together. You can't put them all in the same room. So it was a lot of that was kind of the working model, and or at least what generated what for me the model that we had. What happened for me, if I were going to make a metaphor, it's not an analogy, I would say we were successful in changing our colonial status, but we didn't have a revolution. We didn't liberate ourselves from the colonial master. We just changed our status. So rather than being in a colony, we became part of the empire. What like Jamaica is part of the British. What the British did with all those countries that they used to call colonies. They became quote nation states, but but as nation states, they didn't as nation states they didn't have total autonomy. They were still agents of the British or some colonial power, and that's a lot where we are with America now. And for me, the impact of that is you can see we now have a couple of generations who, particularly in the professional and educated Black class, who are like neo-colonial, neo-colonial elites, native elites, whose interests are as much as aligned with with whoever the colonial power is, as they are with the masses that still suffer from the inequities of a colonial structure. And we never did, we were struggling with that theory back then so we could figure out practice. And we never really got there.
I'm sorry, I just had to say that's an interesting analysis that you just that's really interesting.
Well, that's just because I'm 75 Tuesday, that's all.
We've been joined by attorney Jerryl Christmas as well. And Jerryl Christmas, Mike has worked on both sides just as well. I'm not sure to what extent your activism has gone, but I can tell you that Jerryl Christmas has been on the inside in the Senate, working for a U.S. senator, and he has engaged in activism at the same time. And with respect to the things that were put in motion um, uh, by the convention. Jerryl, are there any remnants of that you've seen, and how best, if you're talking to someone that may be um, maybe walking the line of being an activist as well as being a part of that the formal political structure that the colony of the United States has. What is what are your thoughts on how to navigate those?
It's a difficult landscape to navigate. Good morning to everybody. I think not Larry, but Mike is right on point. And that's the benefit of having somebody 75. Mike, you're gonna have to live to be 105 because we need this kind of information tremendously. I think you cut it short when you said anybody under, what did you say, under 50 or under 40?
Under
I said
30.
under 40.
Under 40,
But
yeah.
I could have said 50. And
I think you really could have said 60 because I think about being 60, being born in 63, and I really have no recollection of what you're talking about. Because when you talk about 73, I was 10, and I just don't have any recollection of what happened from 0 to 10 as far as what was going on politically and culturally. And I can remember like Congressman Clay being elected and maybe a few other things, but not really having any kind of understanding about what was actually going on in the country and the whole concept. I thought about you because yesterday was the anniversary of LBJ's speech to Congress asking for the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And I thought about how you talk about how he was the last president to put our needs, Black needs, ahead of the white population to maintain white unity.
Jerryl, just hop in for just a minute. I'd say Lyndon Johnson is not the last president. He's one of the only two that have ever done that. The first one was Ulysses S. Grant doing Reconstruction, and then Lyndon Johnson from 63 to 68 with the Great Society. But both of those are examples of maximizing what you can do in the structural content, but not creating any kind of radical cultural change from a revolutionary or normative standpoint. So those were both, and because of that, and we get tired of struggling because all people do. And so we want to win and go home. And you got to understand these are just battles that we have won, defining battles that give you an advantage, but they're just battles. And the war is still going on. Will go on. One of the things that the legacy that we're going to pass on is the legacy we've inherited, and that is the struggle. Okay, no matter what else you leave your kids, you're going to leave them this struggle. And one of our weaknesses now, as opposed to, I'd say, every generation from me on back, we no longer prepare our kids for their struggle. And
Let me ask the panel right now. One of the tenets of the congregation and the delegates was independence and self-determination in both Black political and economic life, as well as the Black community. Where do we go, or where can we look today for that sort of leadership?
Well, I think that's been part of that's also been a part of our issue is we think the answer to that question is some singular
Right.
individual as opposed to putting in the work. Because again, the platform don't change. Our platform is the same. The things that are listed here are not complex things. So when so we talk about our political piece, we need to establish that political group, and we got to do that at each level. And so in each community, there needed to be somebody doing this work in their community, and then at some
Look,
point, all of the communities get together, and then
But
it just steady rises up. Go ahead, Mike Jones.
sure, let me go back. One of the issues is we borrowed back then. We borrowed wholesale the vocabulary, grammar structure, rhetorical flourishes from independence and revolutionary movements throughout Africa and Asia. Okay, and when you realize that America was the last stand of Western imperialism, then all of these countries that were top independent, physically independent, agency were fighting for self-determination, decolonization, whatever term of art you want to use. So there was a revolutionary vocabulary, a resistance vocabulary that if you were Black in the 60s, no matter kind of the range of your more radical politics, that became our vocabulary too. And what I said about us as thinking about us as a colony metaphorically, you could say our issues, our struggle were analogous to this other larger global struggle, but not literal, because our physical circumstances were so radically different. But we didn't necessarily make that kind of distinction, because this really was kind of, we were part of the us against them. Okay, so this was, in a lot of ways, this was the whole, this was, you guys, we now live in the era of Western neocolonialism that America is the major advocate for. But if you lived through the 60s, the one thing that I would say, if you came to political maturity, like the time I did, more likely than not, you had rejected America. I mean, literally, the whole notion of the American project was what you were challenging. Okay, so the notion, you got run out the room talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It wouldn't be no room in America that you can make that speech in. And now we got a whole God.
Let me ask you this, Mike.
Right.
That is, boy, you bring up just a treasure trove of topics. But with respect to the Black communities, which is very difficult to define, we don't know what that is, but the tenements of that right now, and the relationship with the international community back at this time and today, what is that? I mean, when you see those two, does anything come to mind?
We don't have one now. Okay, that would be the big difference. I would say historically, we were always struggling to figure that out. That inherent in all of these Black resistance movements. I'm not going to call them protest movements. I'm going to call them resistance movements, or iterations of these resistance movements, was a recognition that we were part of the diaspora. Now, how that got defined, how that worked, etc., that was never fully developed. And these notions about what happens in the community, if you think about it, It's what happens in the village of Vietnam once the Viet Cong liberate, or in Angola and Mozambique, as you push out the Portuguese, you can establish what the communities that you want, how you want to govern. And I used to, and I still think that Fanon has a lot to teach us about us. When you read him talking about Algeria, from Studies in the Dying Colonialism to Wretched of the Earth. But if you had asked Fanon in 1963, before he died, he'd have told you that nothing he wrote applies to Black people in America. Now, what I did was, when I read Fanon, I didn't read him literally, particularly as I got old. I didn't read him literally. I read him metaphorically. As I say, take these ideas, and is there an intellectual superstructure that you can use to explain us? And I think if we made any mistakes in the 60s going into the convention in 72, and I won't call them mistakes, just early intellectual development, lack of full-scale intellectual political development, we didn't think through a theory of the case. Larry and Jerryl, you guys have heard me say this 100 times. There are three things that a lawyer takes into court: the facts, the law, and the theory of the case. The facts are the facts. The judge gives you what the law is going to be. Your success depends on your theory of the case being better than your opposing attorney to explain to 12 people who don't know what the hell either one of y'all are talking about why you're right and he's wrong. What we were always struggling with, and going into the 60s, we were struggling with what's that theory of the case. But I would say there's a range of Black political theory that fit from Malcolm to Martin. I'll just call it that, with some Nation of Islam sprinkled in, but all of them was rhetorically kind of the same. Post-civil rights, after going into the 70s, post-civil rights, we were Commonwealth. That's what I was thinking. We became part of, rather than being a colony, a Black colony of America, we became a Black community. We became part of the American Commonwealth. We still wasn't totally integrated. You know, the Queen was still the Queen, England was still England, but, quote, they changed our status. And with that, our intellectual economic elites' interests became different than the interests of Black masses. Where before that time, intellectual privileged elites had literally the same interests as Black folks. They had covered over the class differences. After the 60s, after going into the 70s, the 80s, our class schism started to emerge. And America's always been Americans are the most actively ignorant people on the planet. I mean, it's the only country in the world that glories in picking leaders that don't know shit. I mean, literally, no other place on the planet picks people to be in charge like the United States. And we now have gotten as actively ignorant, intellectually as lazy as white people. So we no longer have thoughtful leaders, and we no longer produce thought leaders. I mean, literally, if you're a product of the 60s, you had to be a student at some level of Black political history. You know, you just couldn't walk in and start having a barber shop conversation about what you think. You know, I think LeBron is better than Jordan, but you never saw Jordan play. Okay, you can't have that. The only brothers that can talk about that was the brothers old enough to say, "Well, I saw Jordan, I saw Michael, I saw the." Matter of fact, I've seen everybody play.
Look, you saw Wilt, right?
I saw everybody. I saw everybody in their prime. So and just as a side, my view on that is you should take the centers out of the conversation. Because to be a big man, before we made big men like playing in the schoolyard, everybody's 30 feet from the basket. They played a different game than all perimeter players. So I would consider Jordan and LeBron over here, and then Wilt, Jabbar, Elijah Wan, everybody that played with their back to the basket got a different criteria. And I don't believe there's a greatest player. I think you can have your favorite great player, but it's like jazz musicians. It ain't no best tenor saxophone player of all time. It's just one out of the great ones. Which one do you like the best? But anyway, one of the things we've not done, we don't work on, is what's our theory of the case. For example, you can't talk about a Black political strategy without a critique of 21st century capitalism. Okay. And we had one in the 60s. It ranged and people didn't always have an agreement, but that was part of the debate in the context. So one of the things we're struggling with is just that lack of intellectual effort and historical ignorance in trying to wrestle with these changes. Our condition is still the same. At the metaphysical level, our condition is the same, but our circumstances are different, and we no longer have a good analysis of the circumstances. And I think that's what we're struggling with. You're constantly going into court without a theory of the case. You might know the facts in the law, but you ain't got a clue what you're gonna say to the jury.
Brother Kwabena, with respect to the actual convention in 1972, if there were a few things that you can interject into present times, what would those things be?
Oh man, look, I mean, being right here in Gary as an example, for instance, so we had like about 8 or 9 high schools at the time. I mean, 50 years later, we have one public high school, just one. And these conditions have deteriorated. So that's why when Brother Jones talked about, we were successful in changing our colonial status and being neo-colonial. I mean, being neo-colonial subjects and also having neo-colonial leadership. Because we were looking at, so April 12th marks the 60th anniversary of Malcolm's speech, Ballad of the Bullet. And that speech is so pertinent even today, but it was done in 1964. So 8 years later, a little less than 8 years later, they were having this convention. And I know we had some representatives at that time, because I know Representative Charles Diggs was one of the organizers, along with Murray Baraka and Mayor Hatcher. Again, Mayor at the time, Carl Stokes, a few others. But after that convention, the number of politicians of African descent just blew up, here in the U.S. But look at our conditions. So I think, like our brother was sharing, like we've been talking about, I mean, we have a lot of work to do. But right now, a lot of work to do. But I do think people are waking up. I mean, our platforms like this, the Community Education Network, I listen to Black Power Media periodically, and you get some good analysis out there, but there's so many distractions. They got our youth so gone on this ratchet. Like tonight, as we speak tonight, the NAACP Image Awards will once again be honoring or awarding and rewarding songs that demean and degrade us and which focus on our youth to tell us to take each other's life, call us N's and B's. So I see some positivity. I'm optimistic. I'm still optimistic. And I want to share this book too. These brother and sister here, a couple of people represented this Black Agenda book at the commemoration also. And so it was Brother Revine Fellows and Sister Gail Frazier.
Lift it up higher. We can't see the bottom of it. Lift it up higher.
The Black Agenda is the name of the book. And so they presented at that at the commemoration a couple years ago. And one of the things they have on the agenda, Dr. Charles, they talked about from 1820s. And you see it from the 1820s to 2021. They were talking about these conferences and conventions, like you said, been going on. These agendas are already here. But yeah, so no, we got, again, just a lot of work to do. And as we talk about the Battle of the Bullet anniversary, we're coming up on next year will be the 100th anniversary of Malcolm's birth. And we're gonna deal with some of these things. But another thing we deal with when I talked about that music too, real quick, is we had a brother talk about the music in 1972 as compared to 2022. Brother Theo, the thinker, he didn't really want to talk about today's music as much, but he talked about a lot of those hit songs from 1972, and how, as culture. Culture is a major part of this, and this too. It is, like I said, culture is about what we read. Culture is everything. So, but yeah, I know it was all around a little bit on that, but man, it's a lot of work to do, and that's why it's so important what we're doing later today. We're having this AJazz event here, AJazz, Pioneers of the Black is Beautiful movement, where they're going to talk about the Grand Decimados and the founding of the Grand Decimados out of New York City. And these were models who highlighted natural hair, African art, all of that. And this is all came from Alambe Broth and his brother and this group of brothers called AJazz. And Alambe, as you all know or may not know, worked with Carlos Cooks, who was like a predecessor, follower of Marcus Garvey. So that connection was right there. So, and just to keep pushing this information and sharing this information, because we got to get this down to St. Louis too, and all around the country, this documentary from this sister Louise Dente. But it's just so much work that we have to, continue to do.
Can you expand on the documentary? The filmmaker, the content, is it available on social media, so forth?
It's not available, and that's why one of the reasons I haven't seen it yet. But working with Bob Law and the National Black Leadership Alliance and this issue concerning the music, he would always talk about the Grand Decimados and the Black Arts Movement, with Brother Gums and again Alambe and his brother and this movement. And so when this documentary came out a couple of years ago, I was like, no, we got to get this to Gary. We got to get this documentary shown. And it's right now. I'll see the filmmaker in the field when she gets in town. But our proposal is to get this film out. This film does not need to be hidden. This film needs to get out. And so, we're gonna find a sponsor and get this film out so that people can see it. Because right now, you couldn't even see it right now. We got to change that.
It is that is something that's personal and close to me. Yesterday, I spent a significant amount of time just looking at the backstory of the director of Sankofa, the movie that I highly recommend everyone see. It's an old movie, but the director of that movie is fascinating. And the things that we still have a problem with are the distribution of things that are ours that have not been edited, for lack of a better term, by Hollywood, and co-opted by Hollywood and curated by Hollywood. So that is that's a major issue. Jerryl, do you have any thoughts at this?
I'm just thinking of how much work we still have to do and how hard it is right now to get our people, just the masses, the people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, to come to this line of thinking. Because as Mike has said, everybody is just so far off the mark. It just seems impossible to turn us in that direction. I know nothing is impossible, but it just seems just extremely hard, and it's frustrating, especially when you talk about the class system we have, and so many Black people who are in the middle and upper class that don't even see a need for this conversation, that are more or less primarily interested in just being a part of this country and working in the method that the country is already operating. They don't even see themselves as suffering or as a need to reach out and try to educate and move us in these directions. You know, we just don't have that catalyst right now. And I feel like we need something to happen to create that catalyst, especially in the upper and middle class Black generations.
But something that's happening all day, every day. So we, so like as we've pivoted a little bit into the communication piece of us. That's an agenda item. So part of the reason why this thing feels so, daunting is that people keep thinking that we got to start from zero. We don't have to start. We got infrastructure that we don't utilize.
But it's hard to
So
move that infrastructure, Dr. Alexander. I agree with you. We do
hard to
have
move it
infrastructure.
because we don't use it. So again, Larry's question. So where we are internationally, from the time the Vietnam War started on through the Gary Convention, our position in the main, once our position in the main, so I'm not talking about the so-called political elites, I'm talking about the masses of people, had shifted to we are pro-Palestinian. That's an agenda item in 72. It was an agenda item that the Black Panther, well, not the Panther, but SNCC moved, Dr. King was already anti-war, but SNCC moved him to a position where he had to be public in that space. That was the issue the whole time. Here we are today. So where are we with our international piece? We got goofy Black pastors telling their congregations that we rolling with Israel because that's going to bring Jesus back. That's foolishness. And so that is what's happening. Communication. We talking about getting this stuff out. Communication. That's an agenda item. That's an agenda item in 72. Move to control television and radio. Move from media watch, form a media watchdog committee. Why do we need a media watchdog committee? To do exactly what Kwabena is talking about. How we got the NAACP, lauding foolish music, right? Because we don't have a media watchdog committee. Why ain't the NAACP a part of the media watchdog committee?
That's the
right?
question. Why aren't they part of that?
Is that a rhetorical question? Is it a rhetorical question? It's got to be a rhetorical question.
It's not. No. So the thing is we have these things. We're not doing it. And it don't require some major lift. These are, as I said, these are the same issues that we've ever had, and we've established the platforms. We got to do them.
But hold on. But note that the Congressional Black Caucus did not sign off on the convention because
not only did they not sign off,
wait a minute. Because of the Palestinian selection. That's why they didn't sign off on it. So, the vestiges.
And they offered an alternative agenda too.
I didn't hear you.
I said, and they offered, and they proffered an alternative agenda.
Absolutely. So that issue has been one that has been creating, and I'll be kind in my wording here. It's been creating curated individuals for the longest. So those goofy curated individuals.
And that's going all the way back to 72.
Well, it goes all the way.
Yeah, 72, because that's when people started to split with Dr. King.
Yeah. Wait, but here's the point. I'll go back to the motto of the convention: unity without uniformity. I've spent 4 decades in politics. Okay, and when I was on the board of aldermen, we created the Black Caucus, and it actually worked. But here's how we maintained it. we never strove for unanimity. We worked to get a consensus. Matter of fact, we had a rule that if something was a caucus position, all 11 of us had to vote for it. But to get something to be a caucus position, the vote had to be at least 8-3. And on a regular basis, we'd have members from the community say, make this a caucus position. All of y'all on the vote on. But we was, at this point, I'm a college activist who's a young politician. And in the room was 11 different people. And we was kind of like a professional athletic team. We all got differences and we got to figure out how to play together. So we'd meet every Friday morning before we went to work to discuss what positions we go take and how we go play the hand. And everybody would be honest about what they could do, what they couldn't do. So we might have 7, 8 votes for this, but if we try to make it 11, we go compromise 3 of the members. Now, it wasn't always the same members. It was, different folks had different issues week to week. So we'd make a judgment in order to maintain the caucus. Well, 7 or 8 of us is enough to go get this done. We don't need the other 3. So a political priority for maintaining power was maintaining the viability of the caucus. So did you want to be right or do you want to be effective? So again, that is a different context, and you're not going to get. And there was a ton of dissension inside the 60s. Like, for example, if you were a political revolutionary Black national, and you could take Ron Karenga and the more cultural nationalists, there was a derogatory term if you was on the political side of that question. You call them pork chop nationalists, okay? They're fundamentally
Mike, your reception went out. You call them what?
Pork chop nationalists.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And the point is that a pure cultural basis for our politics didn't make sense in light of our class issues inside of a capitalist society. That never got resolved. We got argued about every day, but people were willing to have the argument and keep moving forward. So we were looking for unity, not uniformity. So that's our particular struggle now. But I was going to say what made me get into this is Charles' point about we still got these instruments. No, we don't. I'm going to sound immodest, but as a Black political personality, everybody in St. Louis Black who's functionally literate at any level knows who I am and a lot about me. Okay? From the end, when I write the columns, all the way through the Board of Alderman. I was down to the Board of Education doing a little talk for a training thing. And I walked in the building, everybody knows who I am. I'm not bragging about that. I'm making it as a statement. It ain't because of what I did, but it's because we had Black media. So my whole 40 years in politics also happened at the same time Donald Suggs on The American. So there was a place for me to define my Blackness, my politics, that spoke directly to the Black community. And so that's 40 years of that. But when I started in politics, we had 3 active Black newspapers. We're down to 1 now. And it's struggle. And the publisher and owner is 92 years old. Okay. So how do you produce another Mike Jones? I mean, as a public figure, when your only access to the community is the Post-Dispatch and mainstream media and the bullshit that passes for social media. So the tools are not quite there like they were when these brothers and sisters put their convention on in 1972. There were running debates and discussions and coverage inside the Black community every day, every week, throughout all of this in the 50s and the 60s. That people waited for the Black newspapers to come out to figure out who's saying what. So our reality was not a function of any mainstream media or social. Our social reality was a function of the media information instruments that we owned and controlled. And they were speaking to and for a Black community. That we got diversity and integration and all that kind of shit now, and we don't have that in the same volume, quality that we had. Put like this: you could get a Muhammad Speaks anywhere in town. Okay, you can walk in the barbershop any barbershop in North St. Louis, and you find the Jet, Muhammad Speaks, Ebony, Social Workers, newspaper. I mean, a whole bunch of stuff, and all of that was going on at the same time. So this is a relatively sterile, super intellectually and culturally superficial environment now. We got all the same problems without any of the same energy or level or depth of dealing with it.
You
And
know,
Mike, is my understanding, we don't even have a Black caucus right now at the Board of Aldermen, that they have not met as a Black caucus in a couple of years now. With all the problems that we have in the city, there is no conversation going on at all. I think social media came in and replaced, just a number of newspapers, but definitely decimated Black newspapers and Black magazines. I still think that you can do a lot of that communication though on social media, but you don't have as many people on social media doing that. You have other things, other distractions on social media.
Right. And you're gonna have those distractions kind of regardless of the platform, but the platforms exist. So we have to make better use of
And I agree with that. We got to make better use of our platforms and the organizations that we belong to. But it's just, all I'm saying is that it's difficult because when you go into these platforms and these organizations and you try to push these issues, you get so much pushback.
I want to go back.
Absolutely.
I want to go back to the convention real quick on one point, because oftentimes as young leaders, and Brother Kwabena, please don't go too far. As young leaders, we think that we're supposed to have. Well, they think I'm not in that group anymore, but I'm outside that demographic. That it's supposed to be harmonious instead of the underlining a theme that was front and center in this specific convention. Let's talk a little bit about Michigan's delegation leaving the floor and the beautiful leadership that Karimba orchestrated to hold things together, because there was a chance that the entire agenda would fall apart. And I'd like to open that up to anyone on the panel that has information about that.
Well, I think one of the things I would imagine that somebody knew that was going to happen because it was staged. They went there with the thought that they was going to walk out.
Why did
Because
they
they knew
walk out?
they walked out because the fundamentally they believe the Michigan delegation believed much the same as what the Black Caucus believed. and that was that to align with the mission, and would threaten the Democratic Party, because there were those in the mission. I mean, there were those in the convention who were advocating for an independent party, and so the delegation from Michigan wasn't going to do anything that was going to threaten, labor, and the automotive unions. And so, but they went there with that. They ain't at some point in the piece just decide we're gonna get up and leave. They was arguing that within the delegation on the way there. And so, all that happened is that at some point in the delegation, and some point in the activities, that they thought it time to go, and all of them didn't leave.
Yep.
Some of them left because all of them weren't opposed with the agenda.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kwabena.
I'm just saying that's pretty much what Al Martin shared. And again, he was with the Michigan delegation and came down and he spoke with us a couple years ago. But it wasn't, and that was just on the keeping the Democratic Party together. Was there an issue with them in terms of this whole piece on Israel and Palestine then too, or it was just does
I'm
anybody
not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what Michigan's take on Palestine, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were pro-Israel, because again they were lining up, so like the labor movement was closely aligned with with the Democratic political piece at the time. So I can see all of that kind of being together.
And I'm not sure if that Palestinian or Arab population in Michigan was like it is now, 52
Correct.
years. I'm not sure it was.
Correct.
But right now, they just made a move in that area, really just with that no confidence or whatever, non-committal vote that they just did.
Uncommitted.
Uncommitted, yeah. So wow. No, but even that, what they did in Michigan is an example of what Malcolm talked about that we could and should do. And we talk about 72, Queen Mother Moore was there, for our reparations. And we had Brother Cam Howard, who was at that time, I think was co-chair of NCOBRA, now he's with Reparations United. Right now, he has a push right now, earn our vote, putting pressure on Biden. You've lost 2.9 million Black voters who said they're not going to vote for you. Anyway, if you want to even think about getting us back, you got to sign this reparations commission, not a reparations study, but a reparations commission to look at how you're going to lay out these reparations that we're due. And so, but are we going to do that? That's the question. Are we going to do that? I mean, when I share Cam's information with the people now, they think it's back to what Conyers was doing, and they just, and they're poo-pooing on it.
Brother, share who Cam is.
Cam Howard, good brother from Chicago, was part of the NCOBRA for a while, and now he is he's not with them anymore, but now he's with Reparations United, so he's with the whole slew of reparations organizations trying to get us united, and he's been putting in a lot of work traveling around trying to get us to move forward, get the president to move forward with this reparations commission, get it signed. He said the president right now has the power to just sign that executive order. And so Cam has really been pushing for that.
And NCOBRA is the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. And so, but again, as brother said, Queen Mother Moore, she was there. Reparations was an agenda item then. Reparations is an agenda item now. Reparations, and so all of these things they exist, and we got to keep fighting, and we got to fight these fights. And so while this brother that he just referenced in terms of this sign off for Biden, that's the fight at the national level. But you have communities like here, you got Evanston passed a reparations law. And so people who have, long-term residents.
Hey, Dr. Alexander, let me ask you this quickly. We had these local municipalities doing these reparations, passing these reparation measures. But to me, it seems like they're not capable of actually implementing. I'm thinking reparations should be a national issue more than these local communities doing it to really have a major effect on our community? I just want to get your feedback on that.
Well, I think they got to start somewhere. I think we got to be doing them both. We got to be, trying to get traction at the national level, and that's kind of what Kwabena was just referring to. And I think we got to do at the local level. And so another so so
Hey,
so we have other stuff going on. Another kind of reparations, a thing that is considered reparations, but is not a part of the larger reparations conversation, is that so here in Chicago, we have a torture justice system. I mean, the Chicago Torture Justice Center. And it is considered in the context of reparations, although it doesn't date back to slavery. The reason that the torture justice piece exists is because of a rogue Chicago police captain and his forces beating confessions out of black men from 1972 to 1992. And so part of the settlement of that case was the establishment of the torture justice system, and the descendants of the victims of that abuse, they get benefits from the city of Chicago ongoing. And so it's considered a means of reparations and falls kind of within the reparations fight. And it becomes one of those things that's, that can be used as precedent in order to facilitate the larger reparations piece, just as the work in Everson can be utilized as a stepping stone for those larger pieces. So that's why we need those community level things, so that we establish precedent that we can then move, to other places and continue to do that work. So in California, you got to fight at a larger level. You got local things and state things. You got the governor of California talking about reparations, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 90, ABC, Association of Black Psychologists, had a kind of major piece going on, for the national reparations movement, and had a meeting here, because at that time, in the mid 90s, reparations had kind of gotten to the state level in Illinois, and the attorney general, she had a call for papers, and so so we had we had black intellectuals from all history and political and health and mental health, all of them kind of coming together to put forth this piece to explore. And so that's one of the things that we kind of keep getting, stuck on now, is that each time you had a conversation, somebody say, okay, well, we got to research it. We don't have to research it. We know why reparations is necessary, and we know how But if we need more information, we just need to collect all of that data that's already been.
This is the part of the show oftentimes when I ask for solutions from the panel. But I think I'm going to let the ancestors and those that are still alive that were at the convention speak to it. And I'm going to go to one of the documents. And it states, on the political front, the National Black Political Agenda demanded investigations into the reapportionment, redistricting, and gerrymandering that had destroyed Black political power. It called for grassroots of community political education and endorsed the Republic of New Africa's plebiscite on self-determination. On the economic level, it demanded a commission to calculate a schedule for reparations of land, capital, and cash, and the creation of a fund for Black charity and development. It encouraged Black consumers to purchase from Black-owned businesses and endorsed the creation of Black parallel labor organizations. The document argued for community control of well-funded Black schools, rejecting busing as a systemic attempt to erode Black educational institutions. It pushed for community control of the media, self-determination for the District of Columbia. It advocated for health insurance and community health centers, tax reform and antitrust legislation, free schooling in support of the elderly, community control of the police, and an end to CIA and FBI surveillance programs and funding.
All of which are same things that we continue, we talk
Today.
about. Right. These are all of the same thing. Now, the other thing to know about that, and particularly that's even about the FBI, because I believe just somewhere either somewhere within the year of the Gary Convention. I don't know if it was after or within, in the 6 months previous. That's when COINTEL was discovered. That's when COINTELPRO was discovered. That's when the people had to break in, and I think in Virginia, where the headquarters were, and expose COINTELPRO and the United States, the FBI counterintelligence program that decimated Black leadership and
think though that
organization. And so,
Charles,
mhm.
Larry, I want to take literally what Larry just said and make it the point of our political agenda, because we don't have a Black perspective, which is to me what the thing was all about. When Donald Trump says the Justice Department has been politicized and weaponized, I can't disagree with him, because the Black experience of dealing with the Justice Department and the FBI is it has been politicized because it was done against us. Now, I don't give a damn that they do it to him. So two things can be right at the same time. Okay?
Right.
That fundamental and the mistake that I'm gonna use, and I'm using this term in the revolutionary sense of the way it was used in the 60s. The problem with the Black bourgeoisie is this inherent need to justify white power structures. So you could say, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. I think there are major deficiencies inside the Democratic Party. And if I had optimum choices, they wouldn't be an option I would create. But in November, I'm going to have a binary choice. So the real question is, what's my best move given that when Biden and Trump ran in 2020, Donald Suggs asked me to write something on voter turnout. And that was one of the first Socratic dialogues I did in the barbershop. And I did it with old brother talking to a young brother about it. And the first thing I did was acknowledge you mad and you got a right to be mad. And you want to put your foot in somebody's ass, and somebody has an ass that deserves your foot in it. So I get all of that. And I ain't saying you wrong. Here is your dilemma, or here's your situation. If Biden wins, nothing will probably get better. If Trump wins, your bad will probably get worse. So the real question is, do you want bad to get worse, or you'll deal with this a terrible option and just keep beating him up till you get what you want? And the young brother responds, I hadn't looked at it like that. And
but what about?
I
just want to ask a question. Go ahead.
Go ahead. But since I got kids, I'll have to think about that. And I had an old brother saying, well, okay, think about it. It's your call. But and if I hope to see you on election day, but if I don't, I understand. We good. No matter what you do, I'm not gonna fall out with you about us having a disagreement about white folks. I mean, I just can't do that. I ain't built that way. I'm gonna respect your position because I even understand where it comes from.
Yeah,
Older than you, yeah.
And we at that same position right now again, Mike. And I look back at the crime bill and Biden's input into creating
Right.
that crime bill and his work with Strom Thurmond as he was chair of the Judiciary Committee, you know, and I was thinking about all of that as I was, you know, trying to think about the theory of the case for somebody that I was working with this week. And it just made me realize how much damage Biden and his crime policies and his changes in the criminal justice system has done and devastated the Black community. And even if we go another 30 years, we will not be able to undo or come out of those changes that he has instituted in the criminal justice system that will continue to do that same type of devastation. And it's just hard after I reread that, you know, 30 years later from 1994, you know, now I'm really I'm like what you said. Do I want to get, do I want my worst to get worse, or do I want to stick with this where nothing is going to happen? But nothing is going to happen. It's not going to be good either. It's not going to be good at all. Not good at all.
Jerryl, my point. No, I was just going to say, my point is the mistake that Black leadership makes is trying to tell Black people they wrong.
Right.
You lawyers have a phrase in court. I'll stipulate to those facts. Okay, that when somebody raises it, we ain't gonna get in an argument about that. I'll stipulate to that. Now let's get on with the case, right? Because it's the case that we got to decide. But I'm not gonna argue with you about the merits of this very flawed white governmental system. Okay, I'm gonna stipulate to that. Now the question is, given that, what should we do?
And I think like what Larry read off, the policies and practices that they were saying then are just as applicable right now. Right. But we don't have anybody pushing that because right now, Biden and the Democratic Party, you know, I think we're in a unique time right now. And you can tell me yes or no if it's always that way. But they cannot make it without us. And I think this is the time where we should be holding their feet all the way to the fire, as if, you know, if we don't get it, then we don't care.
Wait a minute. I have told you 4 years ago with the COVID Relief Act, I said the Voting Rights Act had to be the #1 priority for the government for Biden. You had 56 Black members of the House of Representatives and 2 Black senators. If I was running, if you would have, if I could have been in Congress, everybody in America would have died because I would not have let nothing pay. I'd have done like Manchin. Ain't shit getting out of here till you pass the Voting Rights Act. Everybody here can die of COVID. Okay? And you can put it on me. Period. In the conversation. Matter of fact, we ain't going to discuss it. I'm leaving. So call me when you've got the Voting Rights Act and I'll let go of the rest of this stuff. But until then, I don't care what happens to you if you don't care what happens to me. Period. That's the nature of our relationship. And fundamentally, the damage done to Black people psychologically through enslavement, the colonization of Black people, which is why Fanon is so right about armed struggle. Without active resistance, you can't free yourself, because as George Clinton said, you free your mind and your ass will follow. And Fanon says 2 things happen with resistance, armed struggle. You kill the master, but you also kill the slave. And when your oppressor grants you your freedom, that's like somebody who used to take your lunch money telling you you can keep it now. You scared of him for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
Because you didn't make him not.
I
You
think
didn't
we
make him, huh?
do a horrible job of highlighting the insurrections that occurred, the folks that were putting their lives on the line trying to kill their masters every day, the individuals that
But Larry, we don't want to talk. We don't talk about that because it offends white people.
right.
Right.
Right. That's our fault.
We don't talk about a lot because it offends white people.
Right. That's our fault. Mike Jones, quick question. In terms of what you laid out there, wasn't it William Clay that said we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests?
Yep.
And that's how we got to make the decisions.
Right.
And so I hate Joe Biden. I hated Joe Biden since we've been talking about Joe Biden.
Right. Same here. Right.
I ain't never changed on that. But
Right.
it ain't nothing. There's not a single thing in a Republican platform that aligns with the well-being of Black folks. So why we got to keep having this conversation?
Right.
Well, what in the Democratic platform aligns with Black folks?
Everything we need. If we gonna get it, that's what we gonna get it. That's what
aligning with that. It ain't got anything. Like I don't.
I can tell you right now.
What it is we need, we gonna get it fighting within the context of that party. We ain't gotta like the party leader. We just gotta make them do it. We don't even we gotta put the pressure on our state reps, on our in our federal reps. Go ahead, Mike Jones.
Yeah, Larry will remember this. Because he reminds me of it sometimes. I gave a speech to a group that he was at before I knew him. And I said, we got to think about like lions in a lion in the pride. They cooperate in the hunt so they can kill big prey like water buffaloes. And they got to cooperate to make the kill. And as soon as that water buffalo stops breathing, they fight each other like hell. They see who go eat first and who go get the best cut. We got to learn how to participate in the kill and then fight for the lion's share of what the hunt was about.
And so and
I'll give you an example, Jerryl. If you remember, during his first campaign, Joe Biden was staunchly against forgiving student loan debt, staunchly against it. Bernie Sanders said, you're not going to get my support unless you do that. Lo and behold, we've got student loan forgiveness. That's one example, and we have to continue to force the issue along those lines. And we have to be just as cold-blooded as Mike said. This is transactional. And if everybody dies, you know, if he dies, he dies.
He dies, he dies.
I understand that part of it, and no, I'm not advocating. Let me be clear. I'm not advocating that we all switch to the Republican Party. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have a significant number of Black people in the House and in the Senate, and with the margins being so slim, we can't get the things that we want. There's just no pressure being placed on them right now. And we're in an election cycle.
Yeah,
we're in an election cycle. And you know, we're only gonna be in this election cycle for the next 7 months. And we have got to push now while we're in this cycle, or else we will not get anything.
So again,
we can't just say go vote. You know, just get our people out here and go vote, because that's what they want us to do. That's all they want us to do is just come out and vote for them.
But that would be our fault if that's what we did, Joe. So I get another example. Bronzeville. That's you know, roughly on the south side of Chicago. That's roughly like 33rd to maybe like 51st Street, something like that. And I think the western boundary might be Cottage Grove, and the eastern boundary, I don't know. I don't know what the eastern boundary might be. Might be the lake. Who knows? Anyway, those folks a couple of years ago went to the alderman and said, we want property tax and sale taxes in Bronzeville. We want a part of that money to be set aside so that we can establish a mental health program. And so the alderperson said, okay, we'll put that on the ballot. So they put it on the ballot, the referendum passed. And so they are in the midst of building or establishing a mental health program that's funded by their tax dollars, primarily, and then then they'll get other means of financing so that they can meet their mental health needs. That's making this thing work. That again, that could be replicated. You take that model and you teach other people that. We're clearly we've seen that third party politics ain't really no option in this system. So we gotta align somewhere. We ain't gotta like all the players. We gotta figure out how we get what we get, how we use what's available to us to get what we get. And we can find models at the municipal level, we can find models at the state level, and we can find models at the federal level. But we just got to find those models that best work with us. And then we align our mission accordingly. But we can't, just as Mike said, we need to tell the truth. Joe Biden a clown. He been a clown. He an arch enemy. He one of the arch enemies. But this other thing, it ain't nothing in that other place that gets us anywhere close to where we need to be going. And we can't afford to have people not voting because they take our votes for granted. Let's just be done with that whole conversation. You vote where your interests are. Period. That's where you vote, where your interests are. And then you put the pressure on the people that you vote for. And so let alone Joe Biden, most of us don't even know who our representatives are. So they can't put no pressure on them because they don't even know who they are. They've launched, them people on the red side have launched they get all of the energies that they need in their voting demographic from school board elections. That's how they start this thing. They use school board elections to teach everybody they need to teach. That's how they engage white women to vote against their own interests, through school board elections. Why don't we use school board elections? We go to school. And so this stuff is available. The infrastructure is set up. We got to engage and we got to do the work. Now, quick thing about the Gary and about third party. So we know the third party was on the table. Jesse Jackson is standing up on the stage talking about, I ain't dealing with the Republicans. I ain't dealing with the Democrats. I want an independent Black party. 3 months later, he endorsed McGovern. Been a Democrat ever since. He's a fraud, but we won't say that. This kind of politics he's been doing the whole time, but we won't say that. Dr. King dies. What do you get? Operation Breadbasket. Now we got Push. 4 or 5 months later, Chairman Fred gets assassinated. What do you get? Rainbow Coalition. This is Jesse Jackson, right? So he goes from, I want a third party, Black third party, to I'm endorsing McGovern, and now he's solidly Democrat. That's fine. That's what he does. But we need to be critical of how all of that came down. If you like it, you like it. But if you don't, you don't. It's fine. But I'm saying we need to be critical and be thoughtful about these kind of things have happened in our politics. These kind of people do this. And we have to think critically about how we got to where we are, what's realistic, what can and what cannot happen. So if you say to me that he ultimately realized that a third party bid is not an option, I'm fine. But he needed to say that. He ain't need to just pop up 3 months later endorsing McGovern because he probably got something for that individually that didn't benefit the people. And so we gotta educate our people on all of it. The strategies, the you know, literally the literacy, you know, the history, all of it. We got to teach our people all of it so that we can make informed decisions about how we move in this thing. And it can't be just about whether or not we like the person or not.
Brothers, this has been I got to run. I got to get ready for this AJazz piece, man. But man, this has been powerful. And I appreciate you all inviting us to be a part of it, especially dealing with it being headquartered right here where I dwell, where we have all these struggles, but really some good history, great information. I really appreciate you, brothers.
Thanks for joining, brother.
Thanks for joining, man.
And we will want you to, number one, identify that book again before you leave. And number two, your agenda for today. And we would strongly encourage those that are in the surrounding area to head to the DeSabo Museum, not just today, but there's never a bad day to go to the DeSabo Museum.
Right on. The National Black Agenda compiled 1820s to 2021, and it's by the National Black Agenda Consortium. And again, a couple of people, Brother Revan Fellows and Sister Dr. Gail Frazier were with us, along with Brother Brian Gorman. He did the tech for us, who actually put the book together. And so that's the name of the book. And again, they presented at the 50th anniversary commemoration of the National Black Political Convention in Gary, which is available online to view. We had 30 something powerful presentations from our brothers and sisters. So please check that out. And today this weekend, we're bringing AJazz, which is the African Jazz Arts Studio and Societies. They used to put together concerts, jazz concerts in New York City in the late 50s with Max Roach and like his wife at the time, Bobby Lincoln and those, and others. And then they got together with these sisters who were modeling. Grandessa models is what the name eventually became, modeled natural hair and natural beauty, and popularized the Black is Beautiful movement. And the prelim to the Black Arts movement, of which Amari Baraka, who we're talking about today, was a major part of. And so it's and just trying to get that history to the people. We're here in Gary at Trinity United Church of Christ, one of our progressive churches in the community, one of the few that we have here, Pastor John Jackson. And we're there at 5:30 today. The film's going to start about 5:30, and then tomorrow, which is Sunday the 17th, it's going to be at the DeSabo Museum in Chicago at 1:30. The film starts, and then we're going to one of our high school, the one that we have left, where the high school where the National Black Convention was held. Yeah, where it occurred. So we'll be there Monday morning with we got a lot of the student body will be also viewing this film, and we'll make sure that we talk about what happened at right here on these grounds 52 years and a week ago.
Well, brother, we want to thank you for taking time out of your morning to bless a number of individuals. And if there's anything we can do, we stand at the ready. And we look forward to, if it's the Lord's will, living and collaborating with you in the future on bigger and better things.
I don't appreciate you all.
Pleasure.
Peace.
All right. Mike Jones,
Yes, sir.
as we close out, like to have a summation, a thought, a call to order, if you would.
I think the most important thing, because I think it's what we've really lost, is our sense of history. And I'm not talking about the Jeopardy version that tell me who George Washington Carver was, or what was the year of the first Black astronaut, but history in the sense of a continuum, our continuum as a people, because everybody now walks into the space thinking that nobody's been here before them. And that's a function of youth, okay? I mean, you can only know what you know, okay? You ain't experienced anything but your moment. So the notion of that it didn't start with you all babies, for example, are self-centered. They ain't got no idea. As a matter of fact, the only reason other people exist is to make the baby happy if you're the baby.
There's what's the clinical term for that, Doc? I forget what it is.
I'm not sure.
Never mind. It'll
Yeah.
come to you. Go ahead.
But anyway,
Because
but
I've been searching for that all week. The
Yeah.
clinical term for that. But there's
yeah, but that operates on a mass term, and and I come up with these non-empirical based, now research based theories that I think are empirical. And one of the drivers of capitalism is new markets. And so our culture is centered on youth because business always worries about the customer it's going to have. So we have readjusted the entire culture to accommodate young folks who fundamentally don't know anything because they ain't lived long enough. And something I heard, and all you and the three of you are old enough to hear that nobody young today will ever hear. Boy, sit your ass down and shut up. Okay? I mean, just that statement. I had a conversation with my youngest son, who's 38 years old, who's doing, from my perspective, some remarkable things. And I said, how'd you come to all of this, really, this way of thinking? He said, the advantage of being the youngest, I mean, really the youngest, is you can't say nothing. So you have to sit and listen to all these stories. I listened to you, I listened to Chip, I listened to Chink, I heard my brothers and stuff. And you processing all of this. And so then you get to a point where you can say, my views ain't just mine, it's informed by all this other stuff. And you've got these other 25 or 30-year-olds that they ain't heard none of this. So they think you a genius. And it made me think about what made a difference for me is the lived wisdom and experience of people older than me, the stories I heard that I could process and then apply it to my reality. And that's what education is. And we got to get away from workforce development. The purpose of school has never been to prepare you for a job. Never. Okay? It is about preparing you for adulthood and to become a functioning human being in a civilized society. That's what it means to be educated. Training is what jobs are about. And if all you get out of school is training, you're going to be a unemployable, dysfunctional SOB at some point in life in the future. But if you're educated, you'll be able to make adjustments to whatever circumstances you're confronted with. So to me, what we talked about this morning and connected these dots that Charles started with the colored conventions in 1830. So this notion of our struggle starts in 1830 with the Black abolitionists, and it extends to where we are today. And if you walk into a room with that understanding versus I showed up with no history, the first person is a lot more capable of functioning in his interest or her interest and our interest than the person who might be equally as smart, but is much more ignorant of the context of where they find themselves. And that's what we got to do. We got to create context for Black folks about who we are in America. And that's what all the things that the convention, everything before that was always about. What is the Black theory of the case? What's our context for America? Not what white folks think America is. What is America for us?
That's absolutely correct. And the theory of the case starts way before 1619, if
Right.
you know. Jerry L, talk to me.
Yes, sir. What you want?
The summation thought from you. I mean, you have processed some things, and I think that the sentiments that you expressed earlier with respect to um, n- uh, uh, almost feeling as if you're voting against your own interests, voting for Joe Biden, because what he has done with respect to that crime bill has been so diabolical and antithetical and it has created an existential situation for us that we now must mitigate. And there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. We've got to mitigate that. But I am hearing from a number of brothers and sisters as well that they're not voting and not sisters, blaming the Republican Party on doing everything liberal and a bunch of foolishness. But after, our conversation today, I'd just like to know your thoughts moving forward and how we need to.
I'm not saying I'm not at all. I'm not saying I'm not voting. I plan on voting. My thought process right now is that it is critical that we're able to hold these individuals' feet to the fire. And, at both extremely at the national level, but it starts at the local level. Because we have to hold their feet to the fire at the local level, our local representatives, our local people in Congress. And if we don't do that, we're not going to get the result that we can get, out of the Democratic Party. I understand that operationally we can get these things out of the Democratic Party, but a closed mouth does not get fed. And right now, we're just going along with the narrative of what the narrative should be for the white Democratic Party and for the country, but not what the narrative should be for us as Black people. And as Black, it's easier to operate organizationally than it is to operate individually. And organizationally, we are not moving these organizations in that direction, be it the church, be it the individual organizations that we belong to, the NAACP, the Urban League, all these organizations, we are not taking any kind of stance on what needs to happen for our community, and our community is in desperate need right now. You know, uh, in Africa, a lot of times when individuals would come to the village, the first thing they would ask is, "How are the children?" Because that determined the health of the village. And if you come to us right now and you ask, how are the children, especially if you come and ask right now here in our metropolitan area where we at in St. Louis, how the children, we got some terrible things going on, which shows the condition that we're in. And it's as if everybody is walking around oblivious to it because individually, they may be doing okay. And individually, their children may be doing okay, and their investments are doing okay. So they don't see a problem. But there is a major problem out here that will affect you regardless, because it is invasive, in our community. And you can be affected by it just in your everyday life, thinking that you cannot be affected, that you're insulated from it because you're in this culture, in this white culture that's insulating you from it, and you're not insulated from it. And I just don't I just feel like we're just not doing enough in the moment. And that's what's so frustrating. And the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. We don't have that much time, and we have a significant amount of leverage right now, and we're just not taking advantage of the leverage that we have.
That's well said, and you're absolutely 100% correct. Dr. Alexander, what solutions do we have for these issues?
You like literally got to get in where you fit in. Um, you know, part part of the thing that kind of stunts, our relative growth at times is that, we pick the grandest notion of whatever the fight is instead of fighting where we can fighting where we can win. We got it. The the work is much more proximal. It's like, and we ain't doing that. And so there are just simple things that folks could do. A is to register to vote. B is to know who you should and should not vote for. You know, what's going on in your school board, what's going on in in your municipality. Get active at those levels, because that's where the proximal threat is. That's where your relative power is the most important.
And I think you're
And
right with that, because politics is all local.
yeah, then it expands, and we got to continue to embrace these documents. We got to continue to talk to the ancestors. We still got black folks. We got black folks who be on TV, supposed to be political pundits, talking about how immature we are in this political space. And here it is. We got thousands of years that most of whatever we even call civilization is predicated on the intellectual property of black folks. And we got black folks on TV talking about we immature in this space. Hence, because it's on TV, we got black folks listening and believing it. And all we got to do is read this stuff. Yes, sir.
Now, I just want to, Larry, tell you a question. What can we do? And to the answers that Charles and Jerryl just gave, I would say the most important thing we can do is change the relationship between black people and black leadership. Mm. We have this reverence for, well, he's the leader, almost tribal stuff, where you the chief and you look. We ought to have the relationship. Black people need the relationship with black leaders that coaches have with players. Okay? If you can't play, I'm gonna cut you. If you ain't getting the job done, you sit. Okay? And you don't have nothing to say about it. Okay? I'm making the judgment as the coach about what's best for my team. Despite what your mama told you when you was little, you ain't got no right to be on my team. I picked you because I thought you could help me win. You'll stay as long as you help me win. The minute you can't help me win, you gone. What do professional football players tell you? They say the NFL don't stand for the National Football League. It stands for not for long. He said they play you till they can replace you. And they find somebody better, you gone. I don't even give a damn what you did last year. I got somebody better because I'm trying to win. So your only value to me, whether I like you or don't like you, whether you're a nice person or ain't a nice person, as a coach, your only value to me is how you contribute rather, to me winning. Because that's what I'm responsible for with this team. Putting the best team on the floor that maximizes our chance to win. And I don't really particularly care about your feelings. If we can get along and you can feel good about it, fine. If you don't like it, shit, I don't, okay. I'll listen to your complaint and then say, take your ass on back out there and keep working, or you're going to be gone. That's the relationship black people need with black leadership. And until we get that, we're going to be having these podcasts for another 100 years.
Amen. Dr. Alexander, had you concluded?
That was the conclusion.
There you go. I would just add to that. We need to let's stop being in awe of these safety valve individuals in our community that assume that they have made it. That is we have individuals, and we as black folks celebrate if we get a black person that wins on The Price is Right. But that does not change our condition. We need to look at the entire condition that we have, and we need to conclude to operate for the masses. And if you so happen to be a safety valve Negro that has a D&I job, or that the bank has shown favor to, because they can identify your money they can identify the security of the loan that they're going to give you to a veteran's loan, a veteran's insurance policy, or something along those lines. The fight doesn't stop. It does not, because you have, as Mike Jones' mother said, and my mother referenced all the time, $2 more than cab fare. We are all in this. This is a fight, a war. And until we recognize that and make our relationships with those outside of our community transactional in nature, we're going to be in peril, dire peril. Self-reliance is the goal. And we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking to you in the future. And you all have a lovely week.